Heather. I just wanted to record a short video for you, giving you some information about the two poems that you're reading this week. So the first one that I'm going to address was the two poems that you were given. They're both considered American classics. They're both very, very famous. As you might, maybe you can tell or maybe not, but the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is the more traditional poem. It's definitely considered part of the literary canon, meaning that, if you're a quote educated person, you should be familiar with it. T.S. Eliot was definitely an important modernist figure. And then on the other hand, Allen Ginsberg was part of what's known as the Beat movement. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. The Beats were kind of like, I don't know if I would say the precursor to the hippies, but they were, the Beat movement was a literary and artistic movement in the 1950s, and it produced a lot of writing, both poetry and prose. But for some reason, none of the Beat writers, in my opinion, are really taken seriously. Their writing is not really taught or included in many college level or university level classes. I don't know why that is. Allen Ginsberg went to Columbia. Another one of their members, William Burroughs, I believe, graduated from Yale or Harvard. So they were all very brilliant people, but I think the subjects they wrote about were more controversial, maybe. So perhaps that's some of the reason why they don't have the same. Okay, so that could be why they haven't gotten the same degree of recognition, but that's just me speculating. So the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, it may be difficult at first, but the basic theme of it is indecision, and it's called the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Love Song is, well, first of all, Prufrock is a mask for Elliot. Elliot is really writing this about his own loneliness and his own doubt and his own feelings of inadequacy. So he's using this character, Prufrock, as a mask for him. And so you notice that all throughout the poem, Prufrock continues to ask the question, do I dare? And would it be worth it if one would, he continues to ask the question of, do I dare? So we can see that he's trying to work up to something. Now, what is it? In this poem, he invites us, it starts by him inviting us to go along with him on a journey. He says, let us go then, you and I, as the streets are spread out through the sky like a patient etherized upon, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. So he's inviting us to go with him. And the next line that is important says, in the rooms, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And what he means there, he's referring to, being at a party, and there are these women who are very pretentious and self-important, and they're sort of walking through the room, and they're talking about Michelangelo, the artist, not because they genuinely like his art or want to talk about him, but because they think it makes them sound sophisticated. So there, Elliot is pointing to the superficial nature of society, which he's not a big fan of. Prufrock is definitely a loner, so he notes the emptiness of the society around him. And let's see, what else did? So the first then the next important line, he says, there will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of toast and tea. So he's just saying that for every situation you face in life, you will have time to prepare a face or a mask. And there will be also opportunity for everything, and time for everything, from, murder to create. And that's actually a biblical reference. And then he says, time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Now that's actually a reference to an ancient Greek book of fables, the works and days of hands. And it was sort of like a didactic book that told people how to live. So Elliot includes it there because he's saying, there will be time and opportunity for everything, and time for the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. So in other words, when you're faced with an opportunity or a question, how are you going to react? Are you going to make the decision as to what you do, or are you going to live by the book? Are you going to do what society says that you should do? And yet you may agonize over a decision, but just a second can reverse, the decision you've made. Some action that someone else takes, something that's completely out of your hands, can render your decision meaningless, and you have no control over that. And then he moves on and says, and indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare? Do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin. So right there we see he is self-conscious about his age and the bald spot on the back of his hair. So as he's wrestling with this question of do I dare, he's also wondering how does he look to other people, and are they noticing when he turns around his bald spot. So and then he repeats, do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. And then he says, for I have known them all already, known them all. I have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. So he's letting us know that his life has not been one full of consequence. When you think of a life well lived, you tend to think of events of large scale, like celebrations, birthdays, trips, weddings, funerals, like big things that you can't really measure in a coffee spoon because they're much bigger than that. But Prufrock is telling us he has measured his life in coffee spoons, so he recognizes that he has not done much with his life. So then he asks, so how shall I presume? And then he acknowledges the fact that he's familiar with judgment, that he feels judged. He says, I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall. So when the judgment of others has you, pinned back against the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? And now here he begins talking about women. So it seems as if the question he's trying to work up the nerve to ask is, or the thing he's trying to work up the nerve to do, is talk to a woman. Let's see. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? And then he says, though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here is no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. So, in response to the question, do I dare? Should I force the moment to its crisis? His conclusion is, no. I am no prophet. This is no great matter. I have already seen my greatness flicker. It's behind me. And when he says the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, he is referring to death. So he's aware of the fact that of his mortality, and that it is laughing at him, and yet he still feels this unwillingness to dare. And then he asks this question, and this is the last well, almost the last thing I'm going to discuss with this poem. He says, would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain? So clearly he's talking about a date here. Among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all, if one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. So what he's asking is, again, using... creating this guise of talking to a woman. So would it be worth it if you build up the courage and say what it is that you need to say, and the person you're speaking to, and again, we're using the metaphor or the analogy of speaking to a woman and telling her you love her. Would it be worth it to say to someone, hey, I love you, if they turn and say to you, oh no, I didn't mean, you've misunderstood me, I don't see you that way. And what Elliot is really trying to do it's a metaphor. It's not about singing a love song to a woman. It's about communicating with his fellow man, and about how hard that is to do, and how much it takes to dare to put yourself out there, and the risk that we run in making ourselves vulnerable, that the person that we are opening up to won't respond in the way that we want them to, that the person just won't understand. And then the last thing I wanted to just address with you is the epilogue. So you may have noticed that there's a little stanza in Italian before the poem starts. That's called the epilogue, and it's from Dante's Inferno. And in the Inferno, I believe it's Dante and Count Guido. So there are two visitors in hell, and Count Guido is one of the flames. So he's in hell and he's a flame. And Dante, and I forget the other character, they turn to Count Guido and they ask him, why are you here? What did you do to end up in hell? And this is his response, and this is what is quoted in the epilogue. He says, if I thought that sorry about that. Okay, so he says, if I thought that my reply were given to anyone who would return to the world, this flame would stand forever still. But since never from this deep place has anyone returned alive, if what I hear is true, without fear of infamy, I answer. So what he's saying is that if I thought I would what I tell you could make it back to earth and people could hear it and judge me, my flame would be still. I would have no desire to speak. But because no one ever makes it, if you're in hell, you're dead. No one ever makes it back to earth. So I know my secret is safe. I will answer you. So it is about fear of judgment, very much about the fear of judgment and how that creates a literal hell for us. It's also a very beautifully written poem. Now, switching gears to how, I'm not really going to go over it in such detail. I'm just going to say that, I think it's a little probably more obvious what this poem is about, just from the opening line. Ginsberg writes, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix, angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. So I told you that the Beats were sort of like hippies, but in the 50s. So they did experiment with drugs, not really hard drugs, more like marijuana, peyote, what else? I'm not sure if they did LSD, but peyote is a hallucinogen, so it was more like natural substances that they experimented with, except for William Burroughs. He was a heroin addict, and he famously wrote I'm sorry, I don't know why my computer keeps doing that, but William Burroughs was one of the beat writers, and he was a heroin addict, and he went to Harvard. He famously wrote a book called Junkie. And so Ginsberg is not just referring to his circle of beat friends, but also a man named Carl Solomon, who Ginsberg actually met when he was in a psychiatric hospital. And so for Ginsberg, the artists, those who are like more sensitive and creative, this society that they live in is very repressive, and especially on those who are different. So that's why Ginsberg is writing about, the best minds of my generation destroyed. He feels that they're sort of driven to this because of the repressive nature of the society around them. So let's see, what else should I tell you about this? I think this is also a really beautifully written poem. I think it's important to recognize that many of the references in here are to actual people and friends of Ginsberg, and these are references to things that people actually did. For example, I can't see, I have the book, but so I don't know exactly where in this will fall for you, so I'm sorry I can't give you a page number, but Ginsberg writes, who drove cross country 72 hours to find out if I had a vision, or you had a vision, or he had a vision, to find out eternity, who journeyed to Denver, who died in Denver, who came back to Denver and waited in vain, who watched over Denver and brooded and loaned in Denver, and finally went away to find out the time, and now Denver is lonesome for her heroes. That's a reference to so that is a reference to Jack Kerouac and I forget the other, Neal Cassady. Jack Kerouac was a writer. He's best known for On the Road, and Neal Cassady was, I guess, his best friend, and they drove cross country just like crazy. They took a lot of speed and they drove cross country. So Ginsberg is referring to them when he says, who drove cross country 72 hours to find out if I had a vision, or you had a vision, or he had a vision, to find out eternity. And then there's another line where he is talking about Burroughs and heroin. Let's see. But the last thing I want to read to you is actually from an introduction that was written by poet William Carlos Williams. So this is part of what William Carlos Williams writes about Howell and Ginsberg. He says, "Say what you will, Ginsberg proves to us, in spite of the most debasing experiences that life can offer a man, the spirit of love survives to ennoble our lives if we have the wit and courage and the faith and the art to persist. It is the belief in the art of poetry, that has gone hand in hand with this man into his Golgotha. From that charnel house, similar in every way to that of the Jews in the past war. But this is our own country, our own fondest Purlius. We are blind and live our blind lives out in blindness. Poets are damned, but they are not blind. They see with the eyes of angels. This poet sees through and all around the horrors he partakes in the very intimate details of his poem. He avoids nothing, but experiences it to the hilt. He contains it, claims... I'm sorry, hopefully that'll be the last time it happens. He contains it, claims it as his own, and we believe laughs at it, and has the time and effrontery to love a fellow of his choice and record that love in a well-made poem. Hold back the edges of your gowns, ladies. We are going through hell. And what he means is that Howell takes us through hell. Which is what Ginsberg and his circle of friends experience in their quest, to just live as the people they are. And something that may be worth, this kind of thing I don't like to point out to students, because I feel like it might slant your opinion of the poem, but it's probably relevant. So I'll tell you that Allen Ginsberg was gay. So that was something else that, and he wasn't super out, but you don't have to read that much of his work to figure out that he's gay. So that was sort of another thing that he would have experienced, another difficulty, especially considering the time. The 1950s is considered a very conservative decade in American history. So what would I like you to do for your response? I would like you to choose which poem. Again, these are both American classics. They're both very well written, but which do you feel is more powerful and why? So I would like you to include at least 3 quotes from whichever poem you choose, and I'd like you to explain why you think those quotes are so powerful, and if you choose how, you may want to just look on Wikipedia to find out some of the background information, because I think the background information is part of the power of the poem. I think just knowing that it's about real people and real suffering gives it more power. T.S. Elliot, he spent a year writing Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and I think you can really tell because the language is just so masterful. But anyway, so which of the 2 poems do you prefer and why? 2 to 3 pages, and I hope this was helpful to you, and if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Bye.